I've often wondered what it would be like to live through the early 2000s, up to 2003, when the United States actually made the decision to go to war with Iraq, to invade, put troops on the ground, and to install regime change in Iraq. And I thought it would be really interesting to live at that time and see the propaganda machine working and see how many people in my day-to-day life, if I lived at that time, would have actually fell for it. And over the last week, I've realized that people today are just as fucking stupid as they were back then. Now, look, it's not everybody, and it wasn't back in 2003. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people all across the Western world protested and marched against involvement in the Iraq War. And I'm very grateful that a lot of people that I know today clearly see through it and don't think that the entirety of the Western world hinges on whether or not the United States decides to kill a leader in the Middle East and replace him with somebody else. For those of you that don't know, either because you've just given up on following international politics because of how depressing it can be, or you've just been exposed to so much of it that you're now desensitized to the shit show, I can understand. But if you're not up to date, over the last week or so, tensions between the United States and Iran have been ramping up in a way that we haven't seen for quite some time. This all started when the International Atomic Energy Agency, which oversees the use of nuclear power and tries to ensure that no one around the world is developing a nuclear bomb, released a statement that said that Iran was not cooperating with the agency. And in response to that, Israel launched preemptive strikes against Iran, blowing up many of their nuclear facilities and killing a big chunk of their military leadership. This has led to days of tit-for-tat strikes, which are still going on now between Iran and Israel, which have killed hundreds of civilians and don't seem to be calming down at all. The main concern when it comes to escalation at this point is the question of whether or not the United States gets involved, because it seems that Israel is at this point directly asking for the United States to get involved in the war because only the United States currently has the capability to completely destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities. When I say nuclear facilities, I'm talking about places where Iran can enrich uranium. And enriching uranium is the process by which you make uranium usable for nuclear power and potentially at high enough levels for use in a nuclear bomb. And Iran does not currently have a nuclear weapon, but the hypothetical scenario of Iran's regime having a nuclear weapon has scared Israel and the United States shitless for the better part of 40 years now. And look, that paranoia is the whole reason that this thing kicked off. This all started because Israel, or at least Israel claims, that they are doing this, blowing up buildings in multiple cities in Iran, killing hundreds of people because they want to stop this nuclear program from ever getting off the ground, or at least getting to the point where they could develop nuclear weapons. Probably worth mentioning at this point, just for reference, that it is the worst kept secret in the world that Israel currently has nuclear weapons, and they just refuse to admit that they do. So just keep that in mind. So why does the US have to get dragged into this mess? Well, like I said, they are the only country in the world, or rather, they have the only military in the world, at least the only one that's friendly to Israel, that has the capability to destroy one particular nuclear facility in Iran, and that is the facility at Fordow. The Fordow nuclear facility was built under a mountain, and I mean that quite literally. It was built under a mountain range to ensure that it couldn't be destroyed by traditional aerial bombardment. And Israel does not have the conventional weapons necessary to actually destroy it. But the United States has something called a bunker buster bomb, which might be able to get the job done. Bunker busters, as the name implies, are designed to destroy underground target. They are dropped from a plane, they hit the ground, they dig hundreds of feet into the ground, and then they explode. So that could hypothetically destroy the Fordow enrichment plant. So the argument that we're seeing from Israelis is that the United States doesn't have to get that involved. It just has to launch one strike, go into Iranian airspace, use these bombs to destroy the Fordow nuclear facility. Therefore, it's over. Iran then has no proper ability to actually enrich uranium going ahead, and they won't be in a position to hypothetically produce a nuclear bomb. The issue there is that requires the United States effectively declaring war on Iran. There is an insane notion that I have seen broadly, which is, oh, this will just be one bombing run, and that is why we should do it. destroy Fordo, and then the situation is over. If you drop a bomb on a country like that and wipe out a piece of infrastructure of that scale, probably killing dozens, if not maybe hundreds of scientists and civilians working there, that is a declaration of war. If any country in the world proposed, oh, we're just going to do one bombing run over the United States, you don't think the United States would interpret that as an outright declaration of war? There is no small way that the United States can get involved in this conflict without getting into war with another nation. And look, people are saying no boots on the ground, it'll just be an aerial campaign. Okay, well, let me lay out this situation. Let's assume the United States does this. Trump makes the call, they go in, they blow up the Fordo nuclear plant. Is the assumption that Iran will just not respond in any way at all? Iran is surrounded by dozens of US military bases. And there is an assumption floating around that, oh, okay, well, if their nuclear program was gone, they would be scared into not escalating. Do you think a theocratic regime like Iran is going to respond to the US violating their airspace, dropping one of the largest conventional bombs in the world on them, that their response will be entirely rational and they won't escalate from there? People are genuinely gambling on the stability of the entire region on the hope that a theocratic autocracy will make rational, sane decisions and not launch strikes on the dozens of American targets literally on its borders. If Iran responds to the United States bombing it by launching a strike on any of those American bases, and let's say in a horrific situation, 20 American soldiers are killed by Iranian strikes, do you think the United States is going to go, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine, we're not going to escalate at any point from here? There is no way in hell the United States does not then respond with its own escalation. You think Trump, the man that he is going to respond to American troops being killed in a sane, calm, and reasonable way? Do you know the man? Let's just be honest. If this gets to the point at which Iran is responding to American bombings by killing US troops in the immediate area surrounding Iran, then the United States is without a doubt going to pursue regime change within Iran, which will make it another Iraq, only 5 times worse at best. And yes, regime change will require boots on the ground and an actual invasion to some extent. Because people will say, oh no, we'll just bomb them into submission. Do you know how many times post-World War II an aerial bombing campaign by itself has successfully led to regime change? Never. It doesn't work. It didn't work on the specific bombing of North Vietnam. It didn't work on the bombing campaign against Laos. It never works. Yes, it can help you in conquering a territory or a country, but you need boots on the ground to actually do the heavy lifting and enforce this change that you are pursuing. Okay, fine. Let me give some attempt at respect to the other side of the argument on this. Maybe if Fordo is destroyed, the Iranians immediately realize, look, this isn't worth it. We can't win this. We give up. We will give you whatever we want. We will give up our nuclear program and let the West decide what we do next. But if history is anything to go by, the Iranian people are not that quick to roll over. Now, this is not some support of the cause of the Ayatollah or how great his rule of the state is. I just think if you look at history, the Iranian people are not going to give up that quickly or that easily. If you haven't heard, the last time that the Iranians were facing a threat this serious, this much of an existential crisis, was during the Iran-Iraq War back in the 1980s. In that conflict, Saddam Hussein, leading Iraq at the time, invaded Iran primarily with the hope of territorial expansion and annexing certain parts of Iran. In the defense of Iran and in fighting the Iraqis to get them out of their country, the Iranians lost hundreds of thousands of citizens. That war went on for 8 years, and they didn't break. And this isn't ancient history. One of the leaders from the Iran-Iraq War is currently the Ayatollah of Iran. And Iran is currently a nation of 90 million people. Do people really not think that the Ayatollah would be willing to risk the lives of hundreds of thousands, if not potentially millions, of his own civilians, his own people, his own soldiers, to keep the United States out if they did try to pursue regime change? Look, even if the United States manages regime change, the scale of the operation would be beyond understanding. I was reading something from the Washington Post. The way that they understood it is that the bare minimum ratio they were able to find to ensure security in a territory that you are occupying is to have a force there with a ratio of 1 to 50 to the population. That is the bare minimum. So for every 50 people in this place that you are occupying, you need at least one soldier. Once again, Iran has a population of 90 million people, and 50 to 1 is the bare minimum, which the United States is realistically not going to go for. So if we're being honest, the United States would need a force of at least 2 million men in Iran to ensure that there was security and to ensure that they could institute regime change. Where are those 2 million men coming from? How many of them are going to die? How many of them are going to be crippled for life? How many of them are actually going to come home? So if you're a young American watching this, somebody my age, around your mid-20s, the main thing I want you to remember is that the generation before you, they used lines exactly like this to justify the previous generation going to Iraq and risking their lives for nothing. Or no, for something, to make things in the region profoundly worse and for no benefit whatsoever for the United States. All I'm asking is that for the love of God, don't fall for those fucking lies this time. So that was a bit of a break from the norm. I don't really talk about non-Australian politics or international affairs that much anymore, but this was bothering me so much, the fact that we're just watching Iraq insanity happen all over again. Fortunately, I hope that most people are more aware of it now and that we haven't collectively forgotten what happened 22 years ago. But it was bothering me so much that I wanted to vent my frustrations on the internet. But I think most likely I'll go back to the normal type of video that I make here, Australia-centric, because I don't know if this is good for my blood pressure. But thank you guys for listening to this brief break from the usual programming here. And I'll see you guys on the next video. And thank you, as always, for the support that you send my way.